I was just making sure I knew which was which, and thank you for the graphic to help me out here. Clive is obviously the handsome one. So, ladies and gentlemen, Clive de Carle. Clive, thank you.
Thanks, Ian. Thank you all very much. You know, when I was in my early 20s, I learned hands-off healing, but it was when I got to about 33 that I really got my first taste of what healing is about, because I made the biggest mistake of my life, which also turned out to be pretty much the best thing I ever did, which is I went to the doctor who gave me an antibiotic. 6 days later, I started getting symptoms. My eyesight started going wrong. Then I found I was having difficulty walking and functioning and lifting things. And I was told I had rheumatoid arthritis. And it got worse and worse until I couldn't drive, I couldn't do anything. And then one morning I couldn't get out of bed and I couldn't put my socks on. And they put me in hospital. And 3 weeks in the observation ward, I was getting worse and worse. I'd become type 1 diabetic. I was in real trouble. And they basically gave up on me on the same day that I figured out what was wrong. I mean, I realized that it was the antibiotic. They kept on trying to give me drugs, but I kept on saying to them, well, I'm not low on drugs. You know, that shortage of drugs is not my problem. And, but I realized that I was low on magnesium, the simple mineral magnesium. And I got my wife to wheel me out in a wheelchair, and I started taking vitamins and minerals, and lo and behold, all the arthritis went away. And if you'd looked at me 33 years ago, my hands look like a 90-year-old's because they're all calcified. And of course, magnesium dissolves calcium. So I'd like to thank Ian very much, and also thank Brian Gerrish, who gave me the opportunity to put my Health Revolution show onto YouTube and get me slightly more well-known. And then to David Noakes. It was about 5 years ago that I invited David to come to give a talk that I was giving, and we filmed him, and we said afterwards, look, you do realize if we put this film out onto YouTube, you're going to end up in trouble. And he said, well, I've already said all this before, you know, there's nothing new. But it was pretty clear that there was a danger that the information he was giving out, saying that he could reverse cancer and so on, and reverse autism, was a serious problem. Now, I'd like you to understand that if I use the word cancer, or indeed cure, which I'm trying not to do, I will be spelling it with a K for legal reasons. And as Mark Twain famously said, careful what you read in a health book, because you might get killed by a misprint. So everything I'm saying today is just stand-up comedy. It's just for entertainment value. It has nothing to do with health in any way. And if I do say something that you think may be vaguely related to health, then check the facts yourself, right? Now, we go to the doctor because we lose our health. Now, doctors, as you probably know nothing about health pretty much. You know, the average doctor, and all the doctors tell me this, half a day in their 5 years of training. That's how much they spend on time on health. You'd think they spend more than that, but minerals, vitamins, amino acids, essential fatty acids, carbohydrates, proteins, all that sort of thing, half a day. So what do they know when they do a mineral test for you? Well, very little. Now, just while I'm on mineral tests, if any of you want your mineral levels tested, on Monday when I'm doing a workshop, I can test any of your mineral levels for you. Now, what are the big problems? I mean, people say, well, I've got a disease. Well, actually, disease isn't a thing. Disease doesn't really exist. What it is, dis-ease, it's a lack of ease. So what you've lost is ease. You haven't gained a disease, you've lost ease. And so what is health? Well, the World Health Organization define health as not just physical and mental well-being, but social well-being as well. So our government has a lot to do with our health, and clearly our government is not really doing us any favors right now. If I'd listened to the doctors who are advising me, I would now be dead for about, 25 years, because, they offered me drugs, and they also said that I should look forward to having my feet cut off, which, this is real sweet of them to suggest that. So, I'm going to talk about a number of things, but I think I really should start with vaccinations. And I'd like a little bit of audience participation. Could you put your hands up, anybody who has known anybody at all who, after they had the flu vaccination, got ill? Could you put your hands up if you know anybody? So that's pretty much everybody in the room, right? Now, do you know anybody who knows anybody who has an autistic child? If you could put your hands up. Okay, so that's at least 3/4 of the room, if not more. Now, I want you to put your hands up if you know anybody who's permanently suffered from mumps, measles, rubella, scarlet fever. Anybody know anybody? One hand. Okay, so why are they doing it? Why are they vaccinating people for illnesses that hardly exist? They're giving girls the cervical cancer vaccine when it kills something like 2 in 100,000 people, but the vaccine kills more than that. The vaccines are doing more damage than the thing they're trying to prevent. Similarly, what about the tests that you go for? Now, back in the 80s, there was the HIV scare. AIDS, by the way, never existed. That was just the side effects of the anti-HIV drugs. So lots of people I know went for an HIV test because perhaps they'd been sleeping around and husband or wife was worried. They were worried. Now, at that time in the 80s, I assumed that the tests were 100% accurate. I assumed it was black or white. You either had HIV or you didn't. It turns out they weren't accurate at all. If you just had a hepatitis jab, so you're going on a holiday, or whatever reason it may be, turns out that about 40% of the time they were inaccurate. Now, how many people committed suicide? How many people's marriages broke up because essentially they got a test that was inaccurate? So when we're going to the doctors now, are we sure that the tests are accurate? In the last few years, they've downgraded several cancers to benign lesions. Now, how many people had the operations, the chemotherapy, and so on because they were told from the test they had cancer? Turns out at autopsy that on average, all of us get cancer 6 times in our lives, never knew we had it, and repair spontaneously. So tests are incredibly dangerous because what if they test you, say for breast cancer or something like that, and it's one of the 6 times that it never would have happened? They're going to operate on you. Nobody dies of cancer anymore, really. Most of them die from chemotherapy. And my mum died from cancer and refused all treatment, and her death was a pretty peaceful affair. But I've seen people who've been operated on, had radiotherapy, had chemotherapy, and their death was not a pleasant thing and was very, very painful and uncomfortable for them. So people ask me, well, am I a complementary therapist? I'm not complementary at all. I'm fairly antagonistic, really. So, should you have a vaccine? Well, the whole idea is incredible. The early vaccines were, they grew the viruses in chicken eggs. Well, okay, so you're injecting the DNA of a chicken, but that's not so bad. Then they switched to things like monkey kidneys to grow them in. And of course, mammalian growing mediums are full of viruses. We can get monkey viruses, and indeed the polio vaccines. If you're about 60, chances are you had a polio vaccine and got injected with SV40, which is a simian virus. And, it's sort of cancer-forming and all those nasty things, spelled with a K. And, but of course, obviously, monkey viruses, well, that's stupid, we're not monkeys. So now, of course, they're making quite a few viruses with what they call a human diploid cell, which is basically aborted babies, So, only psychopaths surely can think of such a thing to do. And then they say, well, it's attenuated, right? It's not really dead, the virus, or it's not really alive. We've attenuated it. And so to make it go in the skin, into the cells of the body, they put in aluminium, which is a severe irritant. So, of course, we all know aluminium leads to dementia and Alzheimer's, but, well, never mind. And they put in, they used to put in the mercury and all that. Then they put in formaldehyde. They put in antibiotics. And there's a whole host of things. It's pretty nasty. But now things are better. They're using other growing mediums for viruses like dog kidneys and caterpillar larvae and stuff like that. So you don't have to worry about injecting those into your body, obviously. So if you come to Britain, what does the World Health Organization suggest you should have as the vaccinations coming to the UK? We all know that the UK is very, very safe. Well, let me just read you what they suggest you should have in the way of travel vaccinations for the United Kingdom: hepatitis A, hepatitis B, and rabies. All right? I mean, we all know there's a big problem with rabies, you know. I think it's the government that are rabid, though. So they also recommend, this is, hepatitis A, hepatitis B, meningitis, polio, measles, mumps, rubella, tetanus, diphtheria, pertussis, chickenpox, shingles, pneumonia, and influenza. That's what they recommend to come to England, you know. So how safe are we? So you might want to have a look at the European vaccine plan if you want to know what they planned for you. So ongoing survey in Germany, they looked at the health of 17,641 vaccinated children and compared them to 15,320 unvaccinated. So what did the survey show? That's a big number, right? 17,000, 15,000. The vaccinated children were twice as likely to have allergies, 7 times more likely to have asthma and chronic bronchitis, 3.5 times more likely to have hay fever, 3.8 times more likely to have hyperactivity, 19 times more likely to have an autoimmune disorder, 10 times as likely to have scoliosis, 11 times as likely to have epilepsy or seizures, twice as likely to have migraines, and obviously autism. Now, this is a survey in Germany. If you want to, I can give you a copy of this. You can just post it on Google, and you'll see exactly who wrote it. Because I haven't written it down here, which was silly, but I didn't. So, I think we've all heard about what the prospects are for autism. I'm told, and I haven't checked this out accurately, I'm told that if the rate of increase goes on like it is currently, that in 12 years' time, half the American children will be autistic. I mean, if that's true, I mean, that's the end of America, isn't it? I mean, people say that in a few years' time, you'll all be looking after the person in the hospital bed next to you, because there won't be anybody else to do the looking after. I learned a rather interesting fact this morning. Back in 1922, when the American government banned cocaine, they gave an exemption to one company called Coca-Cola, but they still weren't allowed to give cocaine to the people, so the government extracted the cocaine, and they were bringing in something like 320 tons of, million tons or something of coca leaves, but the government extracted the cocaine so that it wasn't, you know, damaging people. But the question is, what did they do with the cocaine they extracted? And this is a bit of a question. So, 5 flu shots increased the risk of Alzheimer's by a factor of 10. So let's talk a little bit about Alzheimer's and dementia. Now, when Professor Alzheimer first saw this new brain-wasting disease, which nobody had ever seen before, he had to call it after himself because it hadn't been seen. Coincided with the introduction of margarine, coincided with the introduction of modern processed oils. You know, our ancestors, if they wanted, let's say, sunflower oil, they would have taken some sunflower seeds, ground them between stones, and out would come the oil. And some minerals would come off the grinding stones as well, which probably did the people good. But nowadays, well, since the beginning of Alzheimer's, how they've made oils is with like a 20-ton ram press, and they've heated the oil up, because obviously heated up oil flows more smoothly. And in that pressurized, heated process, they've destroyed oils. So they lied to us. They said cholesterol is bad, you know, eat low fat. And of course, anybody who believed that and ate low fat and avoided cholesterol, they're the ones with dementia and Alzheimer's. They're the ones who can't think straight. So it's clear that the doctors aren't taught what your brain is made of. You know, as I think you all know, your brain is primarily made of water, so if you're dehydrated, you might have a problem. But if you took the water away, the bit of wobbly brain that's left is fat, you know, primarily cholesterol. So everybody who is on a low-fat, low-cholesterol diet, eating margarine or something, really needs to rethink everything. Now, about, I don't know, 8 years ago, when I first learnt this, I gave a talk, and I said, look, if any of you have got, you know, grandparent or parent at home with dementia or Alzheimer's, try giving them high cholesterol foods. And at that point, I suggested, well, why don't you try 6 tablespoonfuls of coconut oil every day? I said, well, look, you know, if they're demented, they won't know anyway. So 12 weeks later, this woman rings up and says, well, you never believe what's happened. She said, 2 years back, I gave up speaking to Mum on the telephone because it was impossible. You know, couldn't get through to Mum. She wouldn't take 6 tablespoonfuls of coconut oil, but I did manage to get 4 in her. I put one in the hot chocolate at night and 1 in the porridge in the morning and a couple more in with lunch. And she said, now, 12 weeks later, I'm talking to Mum on the phone again. She was saying that she'd reversed 2 years' worth of Alzheimer's in 12 weeks. So, you know, so if cholesterol is what's making up your brain, you might ask, why are doctors giving statins? In England, the figures are, I believe, that 11 million people are on statins. So that's pretty much every over 60 in the country. And so what happens if they put you on statins? Well, the symptoms of statin poisoning include, in men, you know, erectile dysfunction, in everybody, you know, brain wastage, kidney problems, liver problems, heart problems. Almost everything you can possibly imagine goes wrong when you start taking statins, because like any drug, there aren't side effects, there are just effects. You know, no drug is essentially without harmful, life-shortening effects, because we're not low on drugs, any of us. Some people say, oh, well, antibiotics, they work great. Well, antibiotics almost killed me, and there are a lot of people who are ill now because they had an antibiotic when they were young. So who gets the most antibiotics in the world? Well, it's animals, because if you want to get an animal fat, you could do 2 things. You could feed it antibiotics, which make animals put on weight, and you could give the animals MSG. So if you're eating non-organic animal produce, or even in some cases organic animal produce, there is a huge risk that you're getting antibiotics by the back door. Now, I speak as somebody who gave up eating meat for 25 years. Then I changed my mind, and now I'm eating it again, but I would only eat meat, generally speaking, if I know that it's either from a biodynamic farm or an organic farm that's real organic. So I was an organic farmer for 10 years, and what happens is that in Europe, if you're eating non-organic animal produce, cheese, butter, milk, chicken, eggs, beef, whatever, they're allowed to feed those animals genetically modified food. So again, it's like half caterpillar, half frog, whatever. And so should you be eating organic animal produce if you're going to eat animal produce? Absolutely yes. Absolutely yes. And should it be high fat? When I was young, a good piece of beef, you recognize that because it had yellow marbling of fat all through it. You know, when the prodigal son comes home, do they bring out the lean steak? No, they brought out the fatted calf. You know, the cream of the crop, the fat of the land. Up until, you know, we were lied to, cream and fat were a good thing. Look at Switzerland, in the Alps. You know, the doctors, when you went to the doctors in the old days, they would say, well, go and take the sea air, or maybe they'd say, go and take the waters, or they'd say, go and take the mountain air. So what was special about the mountain air? Because there were clinics in the Alps, up until about 150 years ago, who did dairy cures. You'd go and they would give you butter and cream and cheeses and so on. So we could ask any children, what do cows eat? And everybody's going to say grass. No, this is not true at all. Cows, left to their own devices, will eat the leaves off the trees, they'll eat the flowers, the herbs, the mushrooms. You know, cows graze in meadows, rich meadows. But here in England, for instance, they just graze on grass. That's like you eating broccoli for the rest of your life and nothing else. You know, something's very wrong with the way they're bringing up the cows, which is why they're ill. But it's, you know, and people got cured from these high, dense, rich, nutritious, rich animal products. But now most cows haven't seen the light of day. You know, when I was younger, there were lots of cows in the fields. Now they're mainly in factories, and they're feeding them genetically modified soya or similar such foods because it's cheap. And if you're eating animal produce from an animal that's been fed an unnatural food for it, the chances are that animal's got an acidic body and it's probably ill, and you're eating an ill animal. Yes, it's still standing on its feet. A friend of mine used to sell lights to chicken farmers where they'd have 100,000 chickens in one giant barn. Yes, it was free range, but tell that chicken that the entrance is over there, and there's only 100,000 chickens to step over. And the moment they changed the lighting, suddenly the death rate of the chickens dropped dramatically. And he explained to me that they've got it now, so whereas it used to take, let's say, 10 months to grow a full-size chicken, now it takes about 12 weeks. And if they overfeed them by a few grams, the chicken break their legs because they're growing them to the edge of their capability of standing up with all that weight on top of them. So, I'm sure you all know this, the animal food industry is very, very dodgy, but then the food industry in general is very, very dodgy. So what I want to do is to explain how to be well in the face of the fact that war is being waged against us from a health perspective, right? As you saw from David Noakes's talk, they are trying very, very hard to stop any type of cure with a K that could possibly be imagined. But the thing is that they're looking for the cure for cancer, but that's ridiculous because we are self-repairing, right? We can self-repair if we are healthy. Let me give you an example. Let's say you cut your finger. If you're healthy, then by the next day that cut might have healed up. But if you're really unhealthy, it may fester for ages. Let's say you broke your nail. Well, it'll regrow. Just like your finger, the skin will regrow. But what happens with your teeth? You wake up one morning and you've got a toothache, and the first thing that people think of is, I've got to go to a dentist. But hang on a second, if we're self-repairing, why can't we fix that cavity ourselves? And if we treated the cavity in our tooth in the same way that we treated our finger, what we'd do is we'd leave it alone, we wouldn't shove food in or pour hot drinks or pop or whatever drinks you might want to take, you just leave your tooth alone. And the dentists call it remineralization. Your teeth are regrowing all the time, they're being ground down every time you eat. And so the big mistake was that, whoever was looking after you when you were young, they were feeding you the wrong food, you got a cavity, and they went to the dentist who then drilled a big hole in that tooth and anchored in some filling without you knowing that in 10 years' time it'll probably fall out, they'll have to drill another big hole and fill it again, then maybe another one, and then by that time you haven't got a tooth left. So they say to you, root canal filling is what you need. So, could I ask just for a show of hands, how many people have got a metal filling in their mouths? Can you put your hands up, you've got a metal filling? Okay, so thank you very much. Now, who's got a root canal filling? Okay, so let's just very quickly talk about dentistry, because let's say you were a psychopath. What's a really good job for a good psychopath? Well, surgery. Surgery is a great job, and almost everybody believes their dentist is the best, because they don't want to believe that their dentist might be a psychopath and might, So, for some reason, all the dentists missed that bit at school where they said mercury is really dangerous and you don't want it anywhere near you. They just were away that day, obviously. And so the number of videos on YouTube which says, when I had my mercury fillings removed, my tumor shrank in half or whatever, it's huge. So, but what about root canals? No surgeon on the planet would ever leave dead tissue in the body. That would lead to septicemia, you could die from that, except dental surgeons. Dental surgeons say, well, we're going to drill out pretty much all the roots, but they leave a bit of root left, which is very likely to have a bacterial infection. So women with breast cancer, turns out over 90% of them apparently have a root canal filling. 90% of the women with breast cancer. So that surely means that root canals are causing cancer. And so what should you do if you've got a root canal filling? Well, I would recommend either you use a frequency device, and when I do my workshop on Monday, I'm going to be showing frequency devices. I've got 2 Tesla devices with me and various other more modern devices. So if you are around for Monday afternoon, you might want to come to the energy medicine workshop. So you could use frequency, because if you've The problem with the root canal is that they've cut the nerve, so you don't feel pain. You have an infection, but you might not know it. You might feel a swelling in the gum or something, or in your cheek, but you won't feel pain because they've cut the nerve. So if you've got a bacterial infection, you could, for instance, swill your mouth with colloidal silver and hope that that can penetrate into where the void is. You could perhaps use activated sodium chloride. You could, for instance, take megadoses of vitamin C, or you could blast it with frequency. You could use frequency in the form of sound, light, whatever you like, because frequencies will go in one side and come out the other. So what if you've got a mercury filling, a metal filling? Well, they are a problem. I'm sorry to tell you this, and you've got a few choices. There are maybe, I don't know, arguably 10 dentists in England who might be trustworthy to remove them. You know, most dentists will just open your mouth and drill the mercury out. So they're breathing it. You know, mercury, of course, was in Alice in Wonderland, you know, mad as a hatter, because the hatters put mercury on the hats. And if they're drilling it out with your mouth open, then, of course, the little particles of mercury might go down your throat and you'll be breathing it in and so on. So a good dentist, and they often call themselves biological dentists, put a big dam over your mouth, so only the one tooth they're working on is sticking out, so they just work on that. There's no risk of it going down your throat. And they usually have massive, great vacuum cleaners, maybe 3 of them, sucking incredibly powerfully so the mercury vapor doesn't go up your nose or up theirs. So how can you find out if a dentist is trustworthy? Well, I recommend the trick question. You phone them up and say, do you do root canals? If they say yes, walk away. Okay? So what about toxic metal poisoning? You know, is that the reason that the kids have autism? You know, I would say yes, it is. Some people say, oh, well, you know, my kids didn't have a vaccination, but they still became autistic. Well, that was probably because mum was so laden with toxic metals that they got it through the breast milk. So how can you get rid of toxic metals? Well, there are a number of ways to do it. What happens if you go into the emergency room with poisoning? Well, they're likely to give you charcoal as the very first thing, so you can take charcoal. There are 2 types of charcoal out there. There's activated charcoal, which is the most effective for removing toxins, but you can only use that safely once a week, because activated charcoal pulls out the water-soluble vitamins and various other things. Then there's another type of charcoal called C60 charcoal, and this basically is code for old-fashioned charcoal. And I would contend that in the old days, we used to sit around the fire at night breathing in charcoal dust and detoxifying ourselves. Now, there's an interesting story regarding C60 because they did an experiment, as some of you may know, with rodents, where they wanted to tell the toxicity of C60, which, you know, the Nobel Prize was won for the discovery of C60. It's 60 carbon atoms all joined together as a fullerene. And so they had these lab rats which lived 2 years, and all the ones that weren't given the C60 died, but the ones who were given actually what they thought was going to be a toxic level of C60, a really large amount, they all lived to almost double their normal lifespan. So charcoal has been revered over the centuries as a sort of wonder material, and it still is. So charcoal's good for detoxifying everything and conceivably for extending lifespan. Now, there are several other great detoxification agents for heavy metals. One is sulfur, and an example of sulfur-rich foods would be ginger, garlic, cruciferous vegetables, eggs. Various foods, you can look it up, have sulfur-rich compounds in it. As a supplement, there's something called organic MSM, monosulfonomethane, and a lot of people have great results in several ways from using MSM. A, they feel better because the heavy metals are detoxified. You know, if you take a metal and you mix it with sulfur, then you can create a metal sulfate, and the metal sulfates are water-soluble. So you could have had mercury trapped in your cells all your life, but the moment you make it water-soluble, then you can pee it out or sweat it out. And Also, it dissolves scar tissue. So at the end of life, what do we die from? Well, we die from an itis or an osis, generally speaking. An itis is like an inflammatory disease, and an osis like multiple sclerosis or liver cirrhosis or whatever. An osis is scar tissue. And one of the great things about sulfur is that it dissolves scar tissue. So if you've ever had an operation or a physical accident or whatever, or a cesarean, then you might want to consider either sulfur-rich foods or sulfur as a supplement to get those scars gone. Because let's say your lungs are scarred, perhaps you've been smoking too much or something like that, and you're not breathing as well as you might. Well, scar tissue works maybe 1/10 as well as normal tissue. So if you take a lot of sulfur, the chances are that you can regrow normal tissue instead of the scar tissue and start to repair yourself, because, again, we're self-repairing. So why do people get ill in the first place? Well, there are only 3 reasons. Physical accident, you've been hit by the truck, nutrient deficiency, that's all of us, and toxic poisoning, that's all of us. So if you can get rid of the toxins, which you can do with things like sulfur, and you can put the nutrients in, then we are in a much stronger position to self-repair. So what is arguably one of the strongest mineral supplements and detoxifying agents all in one? Well, actually, it's the soil, right? Everything that's ever lived or died eventually goes down into the soil. You know, every leaf, every insect, every animal. So if you could find a bit of soil where it had never been spoilt by modern agriculture, it was just virgin soil, like the middle of an old-growth forest, right? If you went with a bucket and spade and you dug up some earth and you put some spring water on it and shook it around, now you have some muddy water, that would arguably be the perfect mineral supplement, right? Perfectly balanced, absolutely perfect for you. And there are a few places in the world where by geological accident, the nutrients in that soil are incredibly rich. And nobody quite knows how it might have happened. It may have been that a powerful river that was full of fantastic nutrients got diverted, and maybe a volcano went off and sealed it off, or maybe it was a bog where things fell in. Nobody quite knows, but there's this material, wrong bottle, this material, which is called fulvic minerals, otherwise known as fulvic acid. And how I discovered this was about 10 years ago, a bit more. I was researching how the Chinese were curing with a K, cancer with a K, and it turned out they were using a lot of fulvic minerals, and they were using it for all sorts of other purposes as well. And so I started sending off from around the world for fulvic minerals, and fulvic minerals come from the soil. You know, there are just a few deposits. I say, you might have seen those documentaries where the animals walk for miles to cross the desert or whatever so they can lick the mineral-rich rocks. So often this is what they're looking for. And fulvic minerals are what's missing from food these days. Well, all the minerals are missing from food, but you might be taking a multi-mineral, but the chances are it's also missing the fulvic element. So soil everywhere has fulvic and humic acid in it. And so this little bottle would last you 4 months. You just put a few drops in water that has no chlorine, water that has no fluoride in it. And anyway, I tried a load of brands, and none of them did anything for me until this tiny bottle arrived. Previously, big bottles had turned up. This tiny bottle arrived, and I took it in the afternoon. The next morning, I took it, and next morning I woke up, and my body felt 10 years younger. I've never experienced anything like it before or since. And so a bottle like this costs £35 and lasts 4 months. So it's FULVIC, fulvic minerals. Oh, it's me, it's Clive de Carle. Yeah, well-known brand. And basically, the more unwell you are, the more likely you are to experience some change. And a lot of people, you know, I've been giving it to my clients now for 10 years or more, and a lot of people get great results, and it's so inexpensive. You know, not many things cost less than £8 for a month's supply. Yeah.
What about iodine and boron?
Yes, let's talk about those, right? Now, boron, first of all, Boron boosts testosterone. So if you're lacking testosterone, and both men and women need testosterone, boron is a very, very useful and very inexpensive supplement to use. And I recommend you all perhaps research boron. Let me give you one snapshot of boron, because it has multiple uses. The country with the most arthritis in the world is Jamaica, and they say even the dogs in Jamaica are limping. The country with the highest boron in the soil is Israel, and you ask an Israeli living in Israel, do you know anybody with arthritis? And they'll almost guarantee, they'll say, no, I don't know anybody. Let me talk about iodine. You know, what are the most important minerals of the lot? Magnesium is number one, and I'll talk about that in a moment. Iodine, I would say, is number two. Arguably, selenium is number three. So let's just start with iodine. Now, let me tell you a few of the symptoms of iodine deficiency. See how many of you have got them. Do any of you, don't put your hands up at the moment, do any of you walk into a room and forget why you walked in? Right? Iodine deficiency. Any of you got temperature out of control? Maybe hot flushes, maybe cold hands and feet. Iodine controls your temperature. Any of you got dry skin? Iodine is an amazing substance. It controls the thyroid. You know, in women, well, in men and women, most iodine receptors are in the thyroid. In women, the second most iodine receptor sites are the breasts. So let's compare English women, for example, and Japanese women. Now, Japanese women are eating seaweed and fish pretty much with every meal, so they're getting masses of iodine. In England, at menopause, 9 out of 10 English women get hot flushes. In Japan, it's less than 1 out of 10. It's the iodine. Japanese women hardly get breast cancer. Iodine is massive. So 100 years ago, if you went to the doctor and the doctor didn't know what was wrong with you, they gave you iodine, because iodine raises your temperature. Some of you, particularly the people who are older, might recognize the phrase, I'm feeling 1 degree under today. And if you're feeling 1 degree under, that really meant that your temperature is low, you're feeling 1 degree lower in temperature, so you're not feeling well. So this was the remedy that doctors gave you if they didn't know what else to give you. And it worked most of the time. They give huge doses. These days, doctors are taught that you need micrograms of iodine. But 100 years ago, they were giving milligram doses and quite high milligram doses. So the one they used to favor was this one called Lugol's iodine. And a bottle like this would last, let's say, a year, arguably, and cost £20. So it's even cheaper than the fulvic minerals. So it doesn't suit the pharmaceutical industry to have you realize that this might reverse your thyroid problems. And there's a thyroid epidemic out there. You know, people who can't lose weight, they've probably got a thyroid problem. And there are a lot of people on levothyroxine, you know, the drug that the doctor gives you. What if the doctor were to give you iodine instead, like they used to 100 years ago? But now, because of the NICE guidelines, they're not allowed to prescribe Lugol's. You know, could it be that it's too cheap? I'm sure that that wouldn't be the case. Dr. Brownstein, who wrote the book Iodine, Why You Need It, and I'd recommend that you either read the book or watch Dr. Brownstein's video called Iodine, Why You Need It. He reckons that if you were to take the same as the Japanese women do in the form of seaweed, that you'd be taking 12.5 milligrams in water every day. He also then recommends that if you are highly deficient in iodine, you've got those symptoms like walking in a room and forgetting why you walked in, that you might want to take 50 milligrams 5 days a week for maybe 6 or 8 weeks until either your temperature goes up or your health advisor gives you more advice. But if you are doing iodine, you also want to have selenium with it. Selenium is most commonly found in Brazil nuts, if you're looking for a food source, or you could buy a supplement of selenium. The most popular, there's only one type of selenium that really works well, and for those with notebooks, it's called selenomethionine. Selenomethionine, selenomethionine. And methionine is an amino acid, and I'll talk a little bit about amino acids, but let me just fill you in a bit more about selenium. The research seems to show that the people with the highest selenium compared to the people with the lowest have 83% less cancer. I mean, that's pretty significant. In the same way, the people with the highest levels of vitamin D, safe levels, have about 70% less cancer. You know, there are a lot of things that you can do that are perfectly natural, and vitamin D, of course, is sunshine. You know, the more sunshine you get, the healthier you are. I mean, does everybody feel more happy in the sunshine? Of course. Of course. And that's because your body knows what's good for it.
What about transdermally taking magnesium, like magnesium oil and taking it in through the skin?
Yes. Well, good question. So, it was magnesium that really cured my arthritis, because arthritis is primarily calcifications. So because, as I mentioned earlier, magnesium dissolves calcium, then if you take enough magnesium, your arthritis should just go away. There are other things you might need, like boron, like selenium, like sulfur, which all of them can help arthritis. But as far as rheumatoid arthritis is concerned, I've tried suffering. I really don't recommend it. You don't need to. And magnesium is the most wonderful material. So there are several forms of magnesium. There are about 50 different magnesium salts, and they all have slightly different properties. If you go into a health food shop, perhaps one that isn't terribly good, they might say, well, the type of magnesium you want is this one, and it's probably magnesium oxide. Now, if you've got constipation, magnesium oxide is fantastic. Again, the older you are, the more you might recognize the phrase, it went through me like a dose of salts. And that's magnesium salts. In fact, it could be Epsom salts, but magnesium oxide is fantastic for relieving constipation. In fact, it's so good, if you take enough, you better be near a bathroom, because you won't be able to stop yourself. So, by the way, we're meant to have 3 healthy bowel movements a day, one after every meal. I had a client the other day who told me they last went 2 weeks ago. I mean, if you're not going every day or 3 times a day, whatever it is, the longer it's rotting inside you, then there are the people with IBS and colon cancer and all those sort of Crohn's type problems. You've got to have healthy bowels, and magnesium is the answer to almost everything. I mean, let me run through the magnesium deficiency symptoms, and then at the end of running through the symptoms, perhaps you could put your hands up if you've got one of them. So, magnesium deficiency symptoms include things like heart arrhythmia, heart attacks, hiccups, restless leg, muscle cramps, menstrual cramps, panic attacks, anxiety, digestive problems, constipation. There are a few others, but could you stick your hands up if you've got one of those? Okay, so that's quite a significant number in the room. And probably if I'd gone through all the other symptoms, even more of you would put your hands up, because you can. Okay, I'll get back to magnesium. Gout is probably the fact that you're not making enough stomach acid. I mean, there can be a number of reasons. You may be dehydrated, there may be all sorts of things, but most of you are not making enough stomach acid. You go to the doctor with the symptoms of low stomach acid, and they say to you, oh, you're making too much stomach acid. But as we get older, we don't make too much of anything. We don't make too much testosterone. As we get older, we make less of everything. And so doctors have got it absolutely upside down. So try drinking just before a meal a tablespoonful or 2 of apple cider vinegar, preferably raw, unpasteurized apple cider vinegar, in some water, to taste. And that may well give you enough stomach acid to digest food properly, and your gout may go away. You could try eating black cherries. That might help as well. Or if you wanted to, at least short term, make more stomach acid, you could use this, which is betaine and pepsin. Betaine is a beetroot extract, and this is called betaine HCl, which is standing for hydrochloric acid. This one happens to be ancient purity, but most makes of betaine will be fine. Whenever you're looking for a supplement, you want one with preferably no additives. You want it as pure can be. I normally like to recommend pure powder because hopefully the pure powder is pure, whereas if it's a tablet, then it will have been glued together in some way. And if it's a capsule, they often put slippery flow agents in it to make the machinery not block up. But these happen to be capsules. Just so you know where you are, I founded Ancient Purity about 10 years ago because I wanted to found a supplement company where I could say, hand on heart, you can trust this because it's the best I could possibly find. I don't own Ancient Purity anymore. I sold it about 4 years ago. But their products are, generally speaking, very good. So, to show you how powerful betaine is, I had a client last year. She was in her 30s, and her digestion had got so bad that she told me there are only 2 foods now that she could eat. And she was really ill. She was possibly going to die. Those 2 foods were custard and ice cream. Right? That was all she could manage, otherwise she vomited it up. I suggested she tried betaine, and immediately she went back to eating everything again, because all the problem was she wasn't making enough stomach acid. And lots of us are in this situation. A lot of people are in this situation. So let's get back to magnesium again. Magnesium, just like vitamin C, if you take too much at once, the body is self-regulating and you'll get diarrhea. So if you were to take too much magnesium orally at one time, the result would be disaster trousers, as they say. But if you were to rub it in the skin in liquid form, then it's not going through the digestive tract, and you don't have a problem with having to go to the bathroom. And if somebody's got pain, muscle aches or something like that, if they rub in the liquid into the muscles, they'll probably find within a really short time, within a minute or two, the aches and pains have gone. It's dramatic, absolutely dramatic. And if anybody wants to try some, I've got a sampler bottle outside, and people can take it and rub it in, see what happens. So magnesium is absolute magic, and you can take the liquid, you can spray some sprays into water and drink it, you can spray it on food, it just tastes salty. The liquid is a good way to go, and you can get big bottles of that, or you can get it in roll-on form, and I've got 3 roll-on magnesiums out there, one with frankincense, which works fabulous as an underarm deodorant, and frankincense, as you know, is just a wonderful, wonderful material. Then there's one with rose and one with lavender, and the lavender one's great for sleep. And a lot of people find that if they use magnesium before bed, they sleep much better than they ought to, and if they use it in the morning, they have much more energy. Magnesium is responsible for about 300 of your enzyme actions. Magnesium is the #1 mineral, and we're all low on it. And the reason I can safely say we're all low on it is that how your body responds to stress is by burning magnesium. That's how the body copes. So we're all much more stressed than we ought to be, and the stress comes in all sorts of things, from emotional stress to physical stress to the EMFs that are bombarding us all the time. We are stressed. So everybody's low on magnesium, and it's amazing the effect that magnesium can have on people. Not only can their aches and pains go away, but their problems are more easy for them to deal with. Problems don't go away. People take an antidepressant hoping that their problems will go away. Well, the antidepressants, almost all of them, are fluoride-based, and your problems don't go away, but if you take fluoride, then you just don't care the way you used to. That's why they're fluoridating populations. They put fluoride in the water and in the toothpaste and so on to make you apathetic and not rebel. And it's time we rebelled. There's only one problem in the world, just one problem, and that is psychopaths. Psychopaths are in control, and it's not that there are that many of them. According to Thomas Sheridan, who's spoken here before, 4% of the population are psychopathic. So that's not that many. And why there are lots of sort of proto-psychopaths, the ones that go along with it, the ones that work in the corporations knowing they're doing bad things. But my suggestion, if we had to have a world government, well, you should call the ministries what they are, the Ministry of War. Well, what if the Dalai Lama was the Minister for War? The place might be arguably a better place. We could just pick nice people to do the jobs. Now, I've got a suggestion, is that why don't we say to all the soldiers and the police and everybody, look, we'll pay you triple not to do it. Right? Because if we stop war, there'd be so much spare money around, we could afford to pay them triple. Go home and help your family. Do whatever you like, but just be useful in life, I mean, I think the answers are simple. You start looking at all the problems of the world, and it's horrendously difficult and overwhelming and very upsetting, and it seems impossible. But if you narrow it down to let's stop war and let's do away with psychopaths running the place, but I mean, if you're the CEO of a corporation, you really have to be a psychopath. That's the job description, and to run, yeah. So. I believe, I'm an optimist, and I believe we should all be optimists. And, clearly tomorrow people are going to be talking about 5G and how to stop it. In Australia, you might know that they are taking the councils to court for assault. Because assault isn't just somebody hitting you or something, it's the threat of it. And they're winning. The person who told me this was Max Egan. If any of you haven't watched Max, you should. I was giving a talk with Max a couple of months ago, and he was telling me the story that there was this criminal in Australia who was planning a bank robbery, and his smart fridge overheard him and called the police. Yeah, so if you're doing anything dodgy, don't let the toaster hear. So, we were talking at Anarchapulco, which was the world's biggest anarchist conference, anarchist meaning without rulers, and various friends of mine had gone to the town of Cherán in Mexico. I don't know how many of you know about Cherán, but 8 years ago, it had got so violent with the drug cartels and the police corruption and so on, that the women decided to do something about it. They armed themselves to the teeth, and with the help of the men, they threw out the police, threw them out at gunpoint. They threw out the politicians. They threw out the entire government. Yeah? So this was 8 years ago. Now, obviously in a town of 30,000, basically people knew who the criminals were, and a lot of the criminals they also threw out at gunpoint. But a lot of the drug cartels wouldn't go, right? So there was a man, and some people really don't like this part of the story, who went up the highest bell tower with a high-powered rifle and shot 11 of them, killed them. Then the drug cartels left. So that was 8 years ago, and basically they're now an autonomous zone. They're not paying tax. Crime has stopped pretty much. Yes, a few people on a Saturday night might get drunk and do something silly, but crime has basically ended, and it is a state of anarchy there. And everybody I know who's been there says they'd like to live there because it's a state of anarchy, it's all fine. And so you might ask, well, how have they got away with it? How for 8 years have they got away with anarchy? It's because the Mexican government are frightened that if they took Cherán back, that the entire state might rise up against them. So they've let them do it. There's a border around the Cherán area, and they ask questions like, are you a politician? If you say yes, they don't let you in. So it's not that it hasn't been done, right? I'm rather afraid that in England, the majority of the population are too apathetic to even consider it, let alone do it. But we need to take some action fairly soon. And so how could we do it? Thank you. How could we do it? Well, some people say, well, let's go on a march. Let's get 1 million people together and go on a march. Now, I've, for decades, think this is a complete waste of time. But what if 1 million people who would have gone on a march start collecting things to put in their pockets on one day, like cherry stones, apricot stones, peach stones, walnuts, food basically, and plant food trees in sensible places across the country. If 1 million people filled their pockets with things that are going to grow into food, Tesco car park, for instance, big sign saying, help yourself. We could be growing grapevines. Grapes go very well here. We could be planting food as our way of saying, do what we want. We're the people. Obviously, governments have forgotten that they're public servants. They don't know the word public. They've certainly forgotten what the definition of servant is. And I believe we can remind them. We can make a change. We just have to think slightly out of the box. So, getting back to magnesium. You can take magnesium capsules. I make this one from various different types of magnesium. And generally speaking, when you buy a jar of magnesium, it says take 1 or 2 capsules. Now, my instructions are slightly different. I put take up to 12, right? Because a meaningful dose of magnesium may, for you, be way more than you might think, right? How they've fooled us. Fooled us in so many ways. One of the ways they've fooled us is by saying, you just need 2. Well, that may be true. For a lot of people, 2 is fine. But some people, particularly if you're hugely stressed or your diet is very, very unbalanced, you might need way more than that. And, most people are eating very badly. As much as I love everything about this conference, the food here is poisonous. It is. And it's a bit unfortunate. So let me talk about some of the other answers to your health problems. So everything that you're given a vaccine for, you could fix with vitamin C. So when you go into the doctor's office at the end of the summer, there's a sign up which says, the flu season is coming, get vaccinated. So, maybe you've heard me say this before, but what is the flu season? Is it that the flu virus has been in the hot weather, hiding somewhere under the skirting boards, waiting for it to get cold enough when the flu season starts so it can come out and bite you on the bum, Is that how it works? Because the doctors obviously think so. There is no such thing as a flu season. There's a lack of sun season. People get colds and flus generally in the winter because there isn't enough vitamin D. And but the other thing that's a farce about the whole vaccine business is that they expect last year's vaccine, if they inject you this year, to protect you. But we all know that bacteria and viruses are so rapidly reproducing. How can last year's one possibly work against this year's? It's just pathetic. Vitamin C. Now, there are lots of forms of vitamin C out there. I like pure powder, or liposomal as my favorite ways of getting vitamin C, but it's worth understanding that 98% of the vitamin C on the market these days is made from genetically modified corn from China. And, clients of mine used to never really have a problem with vitamin C. Now I get a lot of people, I tried vitamin C, it upsets my stomach, or does this, that, and the other. Could it be that it's the genetically modified version that they're taking which is upsetting them? So the first time I ever saw cancer with a K reversed was with high doses of vitamin C. Somebody I knew got cancer for the second time and was given 12 weeks left to live. And he told me that, last time they'd removed one of his kidneys and he didn't have another one left to lose. And he phoned up Linus Pauling. Some of you may have heard of Linus Pauling, very famous scientist, the only individual to win the Nobel Prize twice, so he must have been quite bright. And he found him in the phone book, rings up Linus Pauling, says, what do I do? Linus Pauling says, take 35 grams of vitamin C in divided doses over the day. And not only did he not die in 12 weeks, but he lived another 20 years, and when he did die, it wasn't from cancer. So vitamin C is immensely powerful, and as I say, anything that you might be persuaded to take a vaccine for, vitamin C in the right dosage will overcome it. Now, there have been people who are supposed to die tomorrow who've been given 200 grams which is a lot, intravenously in a 24-hour period. Some people have had 300 grams in one day. So how do you know how much to take? Well, you test yourself, as they say, to bowel tolerance. Most people can handle 2 grams of vitamin C, that's sort of a small half teaspoonful of vitamin C powder in water. Most people can handle that without getting diarrhea. So if you were to take a couple of grams of vitamin C every 15 minutes on a day when you don't need to go anywhere, that you're near a bathroom, sooner or later you'll get to bowel tolerance, and then you'll need to visit the bathroom, and quickly. So to give you an example, I had a couple a while back. I tell them both to do it. They're both on the surface of it well. They're not quite feeling right, but nothing to put your finger on. He gets to 25 grams of vitamin C, gets diarrhea. The wife gets to 85 grams of vitamin C, hasn't reached diarrhea, but runs out of daytime. So some people need more than others, and the only way is to test yourself. Obviously, if you start correcting the inflammation or the virus or whatever is the problem, bacterial infection, then after a few days, you may need to reduce the dose and reduce the dose and reduce the dose. I know somebody who's massively healthy, and if they take more than 5 grams in a day, they get diarrhea, but they're super healthy. So the first time that I started taking vitamin C in a meaningful dose myself, I started taking 10 grams every day, because one day I woke up, when I was ill 33 years ago, it left me type 1 diabetic. You can reverse type 2 diabetes in 30 days. Go on a raw vegan diet, job done. But type 1 is more difficult. And anyway, I woke up one morning and I couldn't see out of one eye. I'd had a burst blood vessel in my eye, and I thought, well, if this happens in the other eye, this is really bad. So I started taking 10 grams of vitamin C every day, and within a few weeks, I was reading one line lower on the chart than I had been before. Vitamin C is the most important vitamin that exists, right? Magnesium is the most important mineral. Vitamin C is the most important vitamin. What you might say about vitamin D, you just said that vitamin D, is fantastic. It's not a vitamin. They mislabeled it. It's actually a hormone. And somehow to me, hormones sound so much more serious than vitamins. So where should you be buying your food? If you took your ancestors into a supermarket and said, look at all the food, they'd go, what food? Because food comes wrapped in skin. It doesn't come wrapped in packets, So if you have to excuse me, I have a bit of a lisp. If you do your shopping in Deathco, or you do your shopping in Aldi, So I used to be in ophthalmic optics, and I started a company that became the biggest contact lens company in England. And so I've always been quite interested in eyes, and there's a product called Can-C. Now, it's N-acetyl carnosine, and it dissolves cataracts, right? And vitamin C is good at that as well. People don't realize, just like they don't realize that they can regrow their teeth, they've lost the fact that they can repair their eyes. So you can repair your eyes in many ways. The Russians are really ahead of the game. The Russian military had an infinite budget to spend on health, infinite. And because of the Cold War, they couldn't get the drugs. The pharmaceutical industries weren't supplying the Russians because they didn't want the Russians to be well. They were the enemy. And so a couple of things happened. The Russians developed frequency devices. And again, at my Monday workshop, I'll be going into those and actually demonstrating them. So if any of you are in pain, come along to the Monday workshop and we'll see what we can do to reverse that. But they also worked with peptides. The Russian spies had figured out that the Americans had got a blinding laser, and anybody with their eyes open, if they got a flash of this laser, would be blind from retinal damage. And they were really seriously concerned that the Americans might use the laser, and that would be it. So they put infinite budget to fix retinas, and they did it with peptides. There's a retinal peptide. A comes from animals, so the vegans won't want it. They'll just have to go blind. And the most prominent of the Russian clinics is reversing 80% of blindness in 80% of the people who come there. I mean, that's massive, absolutely massive. So how are they doing it? Well, they're using the peptides, they're using frequency devices, they're using homeopathy, vitamins, minerals, that kind of thing. Homeopathy, by the way, works really well for eyes, really, really well. And if any of you are interested in learning more about eyesight, you might want to join my secret health club. I started if you go onto my website, which is clivedecarle.com, you can join the secret health club, and you get, the first video you get is on how to reverse blindness, eyesight in general. You know, over the last 10 years or so, I have made hundreds of videos where I've interviewed doctors and health specialists around the world. And you know, the stuff that I know is mainly because I've interviewed lots of people and asked them the questions that I've wanted answers to. And the thing is that all the answers to everybody's health problems are there. You just put it onto Google, put your health problem in, you've sort of got the answer. Going to YouTube, you've got it. But the problem is there's so many answers, how do you know what to look at first, you know, what to believe? Because whatever you look for, you'll find. You know, you look for the negative, you find the negative, you look for the positive, you know. It's very confusing out there. So the reason I started this secret health club was sort of to try and download my brain into a rather simple, easy-to-use thing. So, you know, Granny's got Alzheimer's, you can look up Alzheimer's, and there are not that many, but enough videos, enough articles where basically you've got the answer, hopefully. And whenever I come across an article or a book or a video that I think, wow, that's really good, I add it to the Secret Health Club. And you know, it's not terribly expensive to become a member. It's actually £100, but that's for a lifetime's membership, and it sort of keeps me running. And you might want to look at that. The second video you get one every month, is about teeth. You know, because there are various bits of me that have gone wrong over the years, so I've studied how to fix myself, really. And you know, I'm lucky. I don't need reading glasses. I'm 65. You know, you can fix yourself in a lot of different things, actually. About 10 years ago, I put on my website pinhole glasses, and I was expecting that after about 2 years, that people would write back and say, oh, my eyesight's improved. Within 2 weeks, people were ringing me up and saying, I've got your pinhole glasses, and you can buy them on eBay for $5, you know. They're just glasses with little holes in. And if you use them 15 minutes a day, you know, you can read with them on in good light, or one good trick is to focus close and then look at a tree way off in the distance and focus on that, and as fast as you can, move your focus backwards and forwards to strengthen your eye muscles. And after about 15 minutes, your eye muscles are going to be feeling quite tired. You know, they're going to be muscles you had forgotten you actually had. My one. Well, you know, different magnesiums are good for different purposes. I mean, a common one a lot of people use is magnesium citrate, because it's nicely bioavailable. The magnesium that I manufacture in capsules has got about 5 different types in it, because there are some magnesiums that are really good for the brain, others that are really good for arthritis, so I've got a little selection in here. The type that's in the spray bottles or the roll-ons is magnesium chloride, thank you very much. And magnesium chloride is the type of magnesium that when the doctors said go and take the mountain air, the sea air, or take the waters, when the doctors suggested you went to a spa bath, that was because the waters were rich in magnesium chloride, and people would hobble in with muscle pains and arthritis, wallow in the waters all day, and come out a couple of weeks later bouncing up and down because they were so much better. But rather than have to wallow about in a spa, you can just rub it in. And the more you rub in, the better. You know, some people say, well, I rub in 3 sprays a day. Generally speaking, I say, look, try 30. You know, if in doubt, try a hell of a lot more than you might think, and do it several times a day. And I mean, it's life-changing, absolutely life-changing. People have rubbed in magnesium chloride, 20 years of pain and suffering gone. You know, it happens really quickly. Yeah.
A friend of mine who works with homeopathy and so forth, when people contact her with cancer, she's discovered that it's more to do with parasites.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you work with that sort of stuff as well, aren't you?
Well, you know, the World Health Organization say the biggest health problem in the world is parasites. And, you know, Hull de Clark wrote a book, The Cure for All Diseases, or something like that, which is all about parasite cures. And there are a number of ways you can get rid of parasites. You know, in the old days, people used to deworm their animals every year and deworm themselves. Most of the clients I get with autistic children, I say, do you ever see worms in the toilet after they've gone to the loo? And a lot of them say yes. You know, but we've forgotten everything our ancestors used to do. You know, our ancestors used to use, I mean, the classic deworming thing was wormwood, the herb wormwood. And people take wormwood, cloves, and black walnut hull, but you have to do it regularly for about 12 weeks. So you've got the whole cycle. You've killed the larvae, the adult stage, you know, and the eggs. So 12 weeks. But there are lots of other things you can use. I've interviewed Harvard-educated medical doctor, Dr. Jennifer Daniels, who used turpentine as her preferred method. And she did it like a Trojan horse. You get a lump of sugar, which the parasites love eating, and you put the turpentine, which is just essential oil of the pine tree, on it, and they eat the sugar and get killed with the turpentine. But frequency devices are a great way. You know, Rife machines, for example, you can take. If you know that you've got a tapeworm, or if you know what you've got, you can just dial up the frequency and kill them that way. But you have to be really careful not to kill too many parasites at once. Otherwise, you can feel awful from the dead parasites going around your bloodstream. So before you even start considering killing parasites, you want to make sure your liver's functioning well, you want to make sure you're having healthy bowel movements, that you're hydrated. You know, it's getting things in the right order. You know, some people say, well, I'm going to do a 2-week detox or something. Well, is that sensible? I think if you're going to do a detox, you should aim to do it over maybe 9 months. Nice and slowly, you know, because otherwise you might feel worse rather than better. And if you want to do a detox, again, you've got to remember there are stages to it. It's not just one thing. You know, killing the thing or getting the heavy metals, toxic metals out of your cells, that may be one part. Killing the parasites may be one part. But then you've got other things. If it's going through the liver, you've got to make sure your liver's working properly to process it, then that the bowels are working properly to actually excrete it. So what are the best ways to do a detox? Well, arguably the best way might be a sauna, far infrared, or better still, a near infrared sauna. The first time I tried a sauna for health purposes was one of those saunas where you sit in it with your head sticking out. And this was an ozone sauna, and there was an ozone generator, and I got really hot in the sauna. Then they put the tube with the ozone into the cabinet and put a towel tightly round my neck to make sure I didn't breathe the ozone. And within, 3 seconds, my body registered waterfall, because ozone is created where water smashes against rocks. And at that point, I had literally a waterfall just pretty much at the end of my garden. So it was a tall one, about 100 foot. So I was familiar with the smell of ozone, and I got it through my skin, I was saying, in about 3 seconds to my brain. You can test this out for yourself. Get a clove of garlic and before put it on your feet, and then put your socks on. Within a minute, you'll taste the garlic in your mouth, because it will have gone right through the soles of your feet, and you'll be tasting it. Right. I have 2 minutes to go. So I do recommend, if you're staying Monday, come to my the 2 workshops I'm going to be putting on Monday afternoon. You might want to come to my masterclasses, because I put on day-long masterclasses where I go into this stuff in great depth. So I've just scratched the surface of what I really need to be telling you, because you need to be resilient health-wise. You need to know what to do if you get an infection, get an inflammation, get whatever disease might happen. Because what happens if the internet went down? What happens if? And you all need to get the knowledge to know what to do no matter what, and teach everybody else. Our job here at this conference, I think you'd all agree, is we need to get the knowledge so we can empower everybody so we can create change in the world right now, soon. So I've got a table out there where my two wonderful assistants can explain to you the various supplements that we've got there. All of them are the highest quality I can find. All of them are, I think, pretty affordable, and they're effective. And I think I'd advise you all to stock up with pretty much one of everything I've got, and get sets of them to give your family. Because if you tell people, look, you need to take magnesium, well, they're unlikely to do it. Buy some, gift wrap it, put a bow around it, and then you can say, have you used your present yet? But you might be surprised how effective very simple, cheap things are. So thank you all very much for listening.
Thank you very much, Clive.
Thank you.